enjoyed this as much as I did. I saw it last night and I saw it today. I'm with the Study magazine, and I had the great privilege of interviewing Bob Poole, our guest today, for Emmys.com, and learned a lot then about the secrets of the elephant. So I hope you're ready for, Bob is just really fascinating. I hope you are ready for a fun chat with him because he just has so much knowledge and just is just wonderful to talk to. So Bob Poole, one of the directors. You had said you don't get to see this on the big screen very often, neither do I, watching it home for work. And it was just wonderful to see it up there. I know you're enjoying it too. And you know what happens.
Yeah, no, it's such a privilege to be here and to share this film with all of you. What a beautiful theater, and honestly, to see it like that, it's fantastic. So thank you.
And you did this episode and the Savannah episode, and for this one, because I know there were 3 DPs, how did you divide up the work? Who assigned what? How did that happen?
Well, there were so many different locations on this project, and many different cinematographers, filmmakers, producers. It's a big team of people that put this one together. I was on the first shoot in Namibia where I shot the baby elephant. But I left that to go to a Savannah shoot in Kenya. So we had kind of a rotating group of, there was 3 of us that were working on deserts. And Toby Strong was also on deserts, and he was also the sort of creative consultant for the whole project. So yeah, we were quite a big team.
And getting to know you before our interview, he's just got a really fascinating story. Grew up in Kenya and has a degree in earth preservation?
Earth sciences, yeah.
Earth sciences. And worked on his first National Geographic film about elephants when he was a teenager. So that's a pretty early start. And his sister, Dr. Joyce Poole, who was the science advisor for the desert episode, is considered the world's leading authority on elephant behavior and communication. So, and also, his father was a wildlife conservation hero, he said, and so it just seems very natural that this is what you would be ending up doing. You know, it just seems you were to the man of war.
Yes, it's, well, my father was a conservation hero. He unfortunately died when I was 17 in a car crash in Nairobi. But he organized a school holiday job for me working with a game capture team before he died, and I went on to do that job, and the helicopter pilot from the game capture went to fly for a National Geographic crew, and the crew picked me up. I was 17 years old, and that was the beginning of my National Geographic career. It was also a film on elephants, and I've been filming elephants since that time. All kinds of other things as well, but really focusing on elephants. And a lot of that does have to do with my older sister Joyce, who she was the scientific advisor on this, but also all the episodes, and she's in the Savannah episode. So my first film for National Geographic was about my sister Joyce. It was called Coming of Age with Elephants. And yeah, she's pretty remarkable.
And so I know you've gone on to do a number of National Geographic projects. So this one specifically, how is this program on elephants different from any of the other ones you've done?
Yeah, so good question. This one is just so massive in scale. I mean, if you watch this series, you'll just see how much ground we covered. And I filmed elephants all over Africa and Asia as well, from the deserts of northern Africa and Mali to the Congo rainforest and in the south and in the East Africa, of course, where I grew up. But that was over a kind of lifetime's worth of films. This was all done pretty much in 1 year, which is extraordinary when you watch the whole season, the whole series.
And in terms of elephants themselves, why do you think so many people are so fascinated with them? I love them. You have your wonderful affinity with them, of course. And I was reading last month's Vanity Fair, Elton John's interview with them, and one of their questions was, which they ask every month, is if you died and came back, what would you want to come back as? And he said an elephant. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I'd want to be an elephant because they have a pretty hard time, whether they're in the savannah or whatever. I mean, they've been hammered, by humans for so long. But I would say that the reason why we love elephants is because they're so much like us. I like to say they wear their emotions on their sleeves. When you watch elephants or when you're around elephants, you understand what they're feeling, which is really, you can do that, right, with dogs and stuff. We all know when a dog's happy or sad or angry. Elephants are the same, only more so. They also seem to have kind of they have a real awareness of themselves. They kind of, it seems like they have a sense of humor. They do funny things that I think they think is funny. You saw the elephant putting the placenta on her head. There's more to it than that. But they put all kinds of things on their head and walk around with it, It's not just a handy place to store stuff, but they actually do it, for God knows what. And so I think they do a lot of these things just because they think it's funny. So anyway, elephants are really cool. But what I really love about elephants is that they're two things at the same time. They're super gentle, but they're incredibly powerful. So if you think, it's hard to convey how much strength an elephant actually has. It's kind of uncanny until you've been pushed around, they can pick up a car and smash it, they can knock it over, they can push it around like a matchbox. I can tell you that because I had it happen to me. But they can knock over trees. If you watch the Savannah episode, I filmed an elephant knocking down a huge tree. And you just think, how is that possible? But it's because they're so strong. But what I love about it is they're so strong, and yet they could, at any time in the filming of these things, they could kill you, but they don't. They tolerate you. And I think that's fantastic. I try, when I'm filming, I try to respect elephants in a lot. Well, first of all, I'm not interested in changing their behavior. We're just trying to film them doing what they do. But sometimes, they happen to be going somewhere and you've inconvenienced them because where you've parked is kind of in their path. And you didn't mean to do that. But at that point, it would be almost as easy for them to just push you out of the way. But they're very gentle, when they pass by, if they touch, it's just a very, like a little rub, they're amazing. They really are. So I think that's why we love them. The other thing is that they have these incredible senses, right? We all can see and hear. I was thinking about this today. It's isn't it incredible how we all kind of can perceive everything around us through our ears and our eyes and our nose. Elephants do the same thing, only on steroids. They can smell like you. They can smell things we just couldn't even, they can hear things from so far away. They can feel, actually. They can hear sound through the ground. It's one of the things my older sister discovered back in her 20s was that elephants can communicate over long distances and frequencies that we can't even hear. They penetrate the ground and travel, and they literally have sensors in their feet that they can pick these sounds up. So they're just pretty extraordinary all the way around.
I know that when we were talking, you mentioned about the elephant smashing a vehicle, and the other things you mentioned were not about elephants being charged by rhinos and lions, and I noticed that the elephant didn't hurt you; it was the vehicle, but not you, whereas the others were going after you.
Yeah, and it was actually an extraordinary circumstance because it's not a normal thing to be hit by an elephant. Really, it's not. That was a very unusual situation, and I always say when it comes to elephants in particular, you know, if you respect them, they totally respect you back. So it's different. Like if you're in the forest, if you're in the forest in Central Africa, you know, they're used to being hunted by people on foot. And you can't drive into the middle of the rainforest in Central Africa. You have to go on foot. So it is dangerous. And elephants are dangerous when you are on foot. But anyway, generally speaking, wildlife is you know, incredibly tolerant, especially elephants.
And for this episode, where were you relative to the elephants at whatever moments, you know, stand out for you, like with the elephant birth and the placenta bath shower? Where were you and how far away? And you know.
So the primary lens I'm using there is a 50 to 1000 millimeter lens. There's no point in getting close to elephants because, again, you would disturb their natural behavior. Oftentimes they come too close and the lens just isn't wide enough. They come too close because they're comfortable being around you. In any case, you know, we film from vehicles and we find elephants by tracking because there's so few elephants in the desert and the desert is so huge that, you know, the only way to actually find them is to track. But you know, basically where they're in the river drainages, you know, where the foliage is that they can eat.
And speaking of shooting from vehicles, I want to hear about the Bobmobile, which is his special creation.
Well, I have a vehicle that I built for filming elephants, actually, but it's just an old Land Rover that I spent about 10 years making modifications to for filming. Just things like I have a jib arm on it, and I have a big heavy-duty sliding slider for long lens work, a turret, and you know, gimbal mounts and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's kind of fun. It's a little extra project. You know?
And you said for this shoot that you had 3 cameras of different sorts in the arm and everything at the same time, which is unusual.
Yeah, that was actually what I did on Savannah elephants. It was really fun. We had 3 cameras running at the same time, one on a jib, one on a gimbal, and then the long lens mounted to the side of the car on a slider. But that's fun because then you're getting all this behavior from different angles at the same time, and you know, it just opens up a whole. It's fun. You know, it's all from the same angle in a sense because you're from the same vehicle, but it's so dramatic when you have a wide angle up high and a long lens down low and a gimbal working at the same time. So, but you can see a little of that because I built a crane for our Namibia vehicle too, and you could see it working in this show. And you saw a lot of moving cameras, so we did a lot of gimbal work on this as well, trying to track with the elephants, and it adds a lot.
And the people who might not know what a gimbal is, what could you?
Oh, so it's just it's a system that nowadays you can put a massive lens inside of a big gimbal and you can move with it. And what it does is it electronically stabilizes the camera and the vehicle, whatever the vehicle's doing, the camera's absolutely dead steady, and you can control it. You can pan, tilt, zoom. From a joystick, from a laptop, essentially a laptop controller. So yeah, gimbals are a big part of wildlife filming these days. They're also, they're amazing. They're super expensive too. It started out in helicopters, helicopter mounts. Yeah, somewhere along the line, somebody decided to put one on a vehicle. And it's amazing stuff.
And you also operated drones for this?
Yes, we used drones for sure. I mean, you can see some of the aerial photography in deserts. Just amazing stuff. The desert lends itself so beautifully to photography because, granted it's hot and dry, and also the light can be very harsh, but in the early morning and the evening, it's just amazing color and light. And the drones were fantastic for filming in the desert. And time lapse. I don't know if anybody noticed any of the time lapses in there, but it's also coming of the storm kind of time lapses are really cool.
And just the vistas were beautiful, and the dunes and the overhead shots of those, and I think this is actually the other episode where the elephants were seen from overhead. I mean, and there was the two, but there was another one, they were like this big, they're elephants.
Yeah.
And you see that overhead on the landscape, just beautiful. So if it's,
no, go ahead.
If it's 120 degrees for the animals, 120 degrees for you, how do you dress? Are you protected? I mean, what?
I mean, it's hard because you're dealing with sandstorms and super high heat. The cameras don't like it. The lenses take a beating. It's again, you're in a vast desert, and you've got to find these elephants. So you're far from anywhere. You're pretty much relying on yourself or your small team, and it's challenging. The other thing is that you don't go out there and things like that birth. That's a really rare thing. You can't write that into the script. You know what I mean? It's like you just have to be there for it to get it. And you can't predict the coming of the rains. That hadn't rained in 8 years, And I mean, I don't know if I just had some ray of light shining on me, but I was lucky. I was lucky because I was there for the coming of the rains, and I was there for the birth of the elephant. And I think that's you can't get that stuff unless you're there, and you got to be prepared when it happens. I know with the coming of the storm, I couldn't believe it, and I had prepared a time-lapse camera, and put it in a case, and it was ready to go. Like, I had everything dialed into that camera, and all I had to do was press record. And I literally, when that storm came, it was so intense, I ran up on top of this hill with Rocky. You saw the landscape. I ran up there with a tripod, and I jammed it in between some rocks, and I hit run, and I ran away. And I just, it was really, that storm coming was so intense. But, it's all that stuff. I think when you're filming wildlife, and especially where you just can't predict what's going to happen next, it's really a lot about just being prepared for whatever happens. And it does help, in my case, having filmed elephants for so long, to kind of be able to hear a sound and then know, okay, what the next thing is going to happen. It's like that.
Wow, so you really do know them intimately.
I know some of their language.
And then your sister she got credit on the screen for the elephant voices.
Yeah, she specializes in communication, so she's actually taught me so much. She's the one who figured out what these calls mean. So, but yeah.
About how many calls do they have?
Boy, that's a hard one. I mean, there's over 50 that are just absolutely, logged, but there's so many. They're discovering more all the time.
And you mentioned in our interview about how you saw things here for this shoot that you had not seen before, and even things that your sister hadn't seen.
Right.
Like the birth. I know that was the first time that was filmed.
Yeah.
And so, what were some of the things that you just had never seen and were unique to this experience?
Yeah, I think the thing that blew me away most, something I'd never seen or even could comprehend, was how far that baby went. Being less than 48 hours old, that journey that it took to catch up to its mother, or to its matriarch, to its grandmother, that was over 45 kilometers in the hot sun, like super hot. And I had filmed a baby elephant dying in the heat of the sun in Namibia, in Mali, in North Africa. And it was terrible. I mean, it was just an awful thing to have to film. And then, you have to follow the story wherever it leads. So then you have to stay with the carcass, and then you have to, it's a totally different kind of story. It's nowhere near as much fun as this one. But I was filming that journey, And I will tell you what happened. We get, at the end of the day, it's dark, you can't film, unless we have like full moon. So we have to go and recharge batteries, get things and get back, and then get back to camp, which was, by that time, it was like 2.5-hour drive. Then we had to come back, from like leaving at, to be there at sunrise. So very short night, obviously, but you get there and the elephants are gone. It's like, oh no. So now you start tracking, and you track and track and track. So I was thinking like, this isn't going to take long because the baby's so small. So we drove and drove, you're just driving down a sand river, right? Following the tracks. And I couldn't believe how far they had gone by the time we caught up to them. And then what you saw there was the rest of that journey. And it was so hot. It was so hard for that little calf. You saw it falling over. And I was just so stressed out because I was convinced that baby was going to die. And I was going to have to film that all over again. The family coming to mourn the death, and then the carcass being taken by hyenas or whatever. It's like you could predict what was going to happen. I couldn't believe it when we had 2 vehicles. So I sent the other vehicle out ahead to find the family. Came back, and then I knew how far away they were. And when we got close enough, I just made the move to get in front of the elephants and get with the family so I could get the shot of them, because I knew it was going to just be crazy when they got together. But yeah, I mean, that was the most. That was the thing that I just can't believe. I never saw anything like that before. That a tiny baby could go that fast and that far.
Just listen to it, it's fascinating. And in terms of your approach to storytelling with wildlife, obviously you're respectful of them, you don't change their behavior, but could you talk a little bit about how you approach the art of storytelling with unpredictable wildlife? And you remember you said that there are certain things that they generally do at the same time every year, and so some of the behavior, you do know. You did say that they mainly walk and eat, and that's not so interesting, but I thought you made that look very interesting too. The beautiful vistas and the tree with the leaves, I found it interesting. I didn't find it not interesting, but whatever your approach is.
So, I think the thing is with these elephants is that you don't really know what's going to happen next. But it is filmmaking, right? So you're always thinking story, and you're always, in fact, you're filming for the editor. Is what you do. Because you have to supply all the pieces, so the editor can actually tell that story. So you're thinking how this could look on screen at the time you're filming it. But you got to remember all the different things. It's like coverage is not that different than when you're covering, say, you're documenting anything, right? Or even if I suppose if you're doing drama, I mean, you still need all those components that an editor can either shorten it or lengthen it or do whatever he has to do to get you to the next thing, an end, a middle, and a beginning. And every sequence is like that. Every story is like that, and each sequence within the film is like that. So, as you're shooting, you have to be thinking about the edit and how it's going to cut together.
And do you have any say in that at all, or do you offer suggestions or consultation or anything?
I really don't very rarely do I have anything to do with that. I basically learned coverage from a DP that I got to be an assistant for almost a decade, and he was brilliant at coverage. And I just say it's just something that you just when you go into any kind of scene that you know that you need all these elements to make it work. And the other thing I would say is that the coverage thing is a lot about thinking of how it could start and how it can how it's going to end and where it's going to lead to.
And how much footage or how many hours of footage do you provide the editor for that 44 minute? I mean, and you're just only part of it.
Yeah, I'm just one part. I'm just one part of a huge team of people that do the work. It just depends. I don't. With wildlife, you're shooting less probably than if you were just walking, filming a human-led story. I would guess. You have. Luckily, these days we have pre-roll, which means that your camera's running and it's just buffering footage. So when something happens, you actually hit record and then it starts going, but you've got those few seconds beforehand. When I learned to film on film, and you didn't have well, first of all, film was super expensive and it was also hard to handle, and you had very short time that the camera could run and all those things. So you really learn to hold back and wait for that moment, watch what's happening, kind of learn to predict what's going to happen next, and then shoot it. And I think I think that still is going on in my head, but of course we shoot more now because it's digital and you just pop in a new card, drop, but. That pre-record thing really helps in terms of the amount of footage that you take home, because you don't want to burden the production with all this material that they then have to ingest into their post-production, and just it eats up time and resources. So yeah.
Secrets of the Elephants premiered April 21st on Nat Geo and streaming on Disney Plus and Hulu, I think, but Disney Plus, and so, that started on Earth Day. So obviously, and of course, National Geographic doesn't just show things for entertainment only. It is indeed to get people to think and learn, but in a wonderfully entertaining way. So your work on this and any other of what you do, it fits into that larger purpose. It seems like it was. So could you talk about what you do, how that helps the world, and whether it's conservation, whether it's the environment, whatever. There's a lot of narration about climate change and how that's causes growth. So where do you see your place and your work in all of that?
It was ingrained into me when I was young, because my parents were conservationists and worked in Africa in wildlife. And so I grew up with that, but I didn't grow up with TV or going to films. I loved photography, but I got into the business. It fell in my lap, and what I loved about it was the adventure, to be honest. And I learned the craft on the job. I was so lucky in that way. And the thing is that I got into it because of wildlife conservation. That my father was working in that job, literally, that got me into National Geographic, was also about elephant conservation. So it started there, and it's just so. For me, I'm so lucky because I got to get my adventure, get my photography, and at the same time get my message out about conservation. So, being able to work for National Geographic is just a dream. To work for an organization that has, conservation on our planet in mind, it's just, I'm just so lucky. That's all.
I think elephants are pretty good ambassadors for that too. What do you think people could learn from elephants in the way they live, the way they treat each other?
Yeah, we could learn so much, I think, from not just elephants, but so many, the natural world. About things being in balance, and I love to immerse myself in nature. It's really when I don't know, I feel at peace, and And I know that, animals don't hold on to stress. They have terrible moments of absolute stress. Imagine a zebra getting chased by a lion. But then, they get away, they just kind of shake it off and they just go back to, doing what they do. They don't hold on to that. We just we live with all this, constant, stress. And, I just don't see that in the natural world.
I never thought of that. I would have thought being chased by a predator would be very stressful.
Oh, I'm sure it is. But they don't, 2 seconds later, they're just back to what they were doing, And so,
I'm going to keep that in mind. So is there anything I haven't asked, we have to wrap up, that you'd like to tell anybody? Tell everybody here.
We just talked about a lot of things. I don't know. Just that I hope if you haven't seen the series that you'll go out and watch all of it. I think the team in the forest and the team in Asia also did fantastic work. I thought the editing is wonderful, and the whole concept, that from James Cameron on down, the idea about Secrets of is really great, because it's, getting us to fall in love with these things like elephants, and we can't save them if we don't love them. I really believe that. So hopefully this helps that way.
Well, thank you so much. Just wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.